And probably that was the reason why, if you look at the stock market index in March of 2020, came down to 9,000, guys. I've seen that with my own eyes. And we saw that, moving up to 9, 10, 12, 13. We have touched a high of 18,700 to 3 months back, 18,700. Now it has come down. Now we are touching 16,400. That's a different story. We're talking about that because capital flow from the rich countries was coming into India, and that was providing fuel for more and more liquidity. Once again, they were also reinforcing RBI's objective, because RBI wanted to put money in the hands of people. So directly or indirectly, all this money which was coming into the country was fueling this liquidity. Guys, we're talking about the budget announced 2 months back. The situation now is completely different from the situation we had 2 years back. We're going to talk about that, right? The whole global economic climate is changing. Now, rich countries are facing bouts of inflation. We are talking of 5% inflation in Europe, and we are talking of 7% inflation in the United States. 7% inflation is something which has not been experienced by US in the last 40 years, which is 4 decades. So extremely high inflation. So what is the US government doing? Every day you find in newspapers, US is increasing its interest rates, not once, 4 times during this year. They have this FOMC meeting, like we have MPC, which is Monetary Policy Committee meeting in the Reserve Bank of India. They also have FOMC meeting, and every time they sit for the meeting, they increase the interest rates. So when they increase the interest rates, the money in circulation is reduced, as a result of which they are able to bring down the inflation. But that increases the bond rates. When the bond rates increases, the FIIs take money out of India, because they are finding safe havens elsewhere. Safe havens, I'm not talking about safe havens like Mauritius, etc., but the cost of capital. If you look at it, money can fetch you a better interest for a 10-year yield and a 7-year yield. We will talk about all that elsewhere, because everywhere you deploy money, you look at the rate of return. And when the bond markets are giving you better returns, the foreign funds are taking the money out, which is called a capital outflow, because this is a hot capital. This is hot money. It may come anytime, it may go anytime. We need to be prepared for that, right? If you look at the last 3 or 4 months, not 6 months, FIIs have taken more than 10 lakh crores, guys. Not a joke. 10 lakh crores, 10 trillion rupees has been taken out. But of course, a lot of support has been provided by the DIIs and the retail institutional investors, because it is the retail institutional investors who are able to buy all that the FIIs were selling. Right? Okay, that aside. Now we are talking about the other kinds of inflations, because it is an import-induced inflation we are talking about. The price of oil has increased, because we have not talked about this Russia-Ukraine war. Because after that, the oil prices are going through the roof. We touched $110, guys. $110 per barrel. We're talking about NYMEX crude, Brent crude. You talk about all these crude. They're all touching 100, and what kind of an impact it will have on oil bill, we really don't know. Today it is 100, because whatever oil supply is coming, they were all forward contracts signed 3 months back. The real effect of $110 we will yet to see in the next 1 or 2 months. We really don't know how things will pan out, how the government is going to manage all this. But the government is smart enough. If you have listened to the budget speech of the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, they've had very conservative estimates, very meticulous planning was involved in managing the finances, because we are not talking about managing household finance of say 70,000, 80,000, 1 lakh rupees. We're talking about, the whole GDP of the country, out of which deficit alone is 15 lakh crores, which is $15 trillion. Look at how meticulously the government has planned. I'm putting up a separate video on that. Please watch that. To what extent the government had preempted each of these developments, and how they've done the meticulous meticulous planning. Absolutely fit for a case study at the postgraduate level, even at the doctorate level. I would suggest, maybe even in institutions like Harvard, Stanford, etc. Okay, that we'll come to that point later. So now with inflation happening in all the commodities, your oil, the other commodities, your steel, your rubber, your steel, rubber, your rare metals, palladium, rhodium, zinc, copper, everything, nickel, everything is going through the roof. Look at gold. Gold has shot up for 10 grams, 52,000. We really do. That's the level of inflation that is happening. And even food, we have left that food inflation, which is a very important component of your CPI. Food inflation is as high as 20%. FAO, which is the Food and Agricultural Organization, United Nations institution, they have come out with figures recently. 20% in the food price index is what we are talking about. And US is going to increase its interest rate 4 times during this year and maybe another 6 times during the next year. And there are talks happening about this balance sheet contraction, tapering of bond purchases. Remember what happened in the year 2014 when we suffered from taper tantrum, etc., etc. I've put up a separate video on taper tantrum and how this taper tantrum has affected the complete Indian stock markets. Guys, you guys need to know what is happening in the country, right? It's not just enough based on somebody said I'm buying Reliance, somebody said I'm buying Tata. Guys, look at this basic economics. Subscribe to this channel and keep watching these videos so that you will get to know what is happening in the country, what is the economics, how each of these things are going to affect the stock price movements, etc., etc., right? All that is happening. So now the government's borrowing plan. We will come back to the same subject we were talking about. We're talking about $15 trillion of government borrowing plan, which constitutes approximately 6.2% fiscal deficit, right? Fiscal deficit is 6.2% of the total GDP is what we are going to talk about. So typically the RBI is faced with 2 big challenges. One is, once again, it can resume buying of bonds and it can keep the interest rates under check. But the problem is that will increase the liquidity, because when the liquidity increases, the inflation once again will happen. Now, how do you control that inflation? Now, if the interest rates of the RBI wants to control the inflation, they want to increase the interest rates. Let's presume that. Then what will happen? Because when the inflation goes up, when the interest rates are increased, we talked about this 15 lakh crores of government's borrowing plan. The government has to borrow $15 trillion at a higher interest. Who will foot this interest? That is the next question. Because on one hand, if you do this, if you increase the interest rates to control inflation, what happens? The growth is suffering. The government has to take money at a higher interest. But if you want to lower down the interest, that results in inflation. That's a very fine line that the government has to cross. It is very easy for us to say the government should do this, the government should do this, but everywhere you are faced with a dilemma. Okay, guys, I agree that in one video it is not possible for anyone to understand economics completely and become an economist. But you start understanding just small bits and pieces over a period of time, listening to more and more this kind of educative videos, and we will keep coming up with all such videos concerning the current events, which will help you develop a right sense, a right knowledge of economics, through which you will be able to understand the current news that is coming out in people. Right, guys? Okay, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and this is Dr. Sadasivam signing off till we meet again. Bye bye. Jai.